Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Stories That Inspire Us podcast. My name is Janice, your host, and today we have an amazing guest on. Now, I just want to preface this by saying that what we are going to be chatting about may be sensitive in nature to some people, but really my guest and my now very dear friend is here today for her second appearance, all with the intent of inspiring others. I want to welcome back to the Stories podcast, Emily Hart. Thank you so much for being here today.
I am so grateful to be here. I've really been looking forward to having more chats, so I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome, Emily. Now, Emily was previously on the Stories That Inspire Us podcast back in early June 3rd. And Emily, I'm wondering if you can just give us a quick synopsis on where you are today and start out with just kind of reintroducing us to your story.
Sure. So my name is Emily Hart, and I own a company called Indigo Thrive. It's a very small business that came out of kind of the ashes of some pretty traumatic events that occurred to me. I am a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, and also that theme carried on into my teens, and I was sexually assaulted at 18. So there's been a series of sexually traumatic events that have occurred to me that have helped, I guess, through that healing process, create something absolutely amazing once I was able to go, so this is just where I am. I hid it for a long time. I didn't discuss it for a long time. Extremely, as you can imagine, very vulnerable, very sensitive topics, a lot of guilt and shame. And so a lot of what I do now with Indigo is using those tools and those positive coping mechanisms to help others find their authentic self, which I can safely say I didn't do until probably my beginning 30s. So it's only been 3 or 4 years where I've truly embraced who I am. And that's obviously still a work in progress. But yeah, that's a lot of what we talked about last time, of just that origination and what that felt like and how does that look, and family dynamics and some of the, all of the unpleasant parts of discussing these types of things. But thank you for the preface of saying that it is sensitive topics. Certainly, I'm not here to trigger anybody. However, I believe what is done in the dark is brought to the light, and when that happens, it provides us with more empowerment. Although always extremely difficult and horrible things, and you can't take that part away. For me, it certainly has given me a lot of empowerment to go, this is my story. There's nothing to hide. I didn't do anything wrong. And that has been wildly nauseating, as well as just very empowering. And so hopefully if other people see this and they go, gosh, I can relate on some sort of level, then whatever I'm here to do is accomplished.
And so beautifully said, in a way to honor and respect your journey, but also to those listeners who will, that may be triggered. And as many of my listeners and viewers know, I've been through traumatic events myself, and I know firsthand how that can trigger the mind and really into such a downward type of spiral where we sometimes do not feel good in our own skin. And I've written about it in the several different books that I've been involved with, and yes, still working on my own memoir. But the point being, if we don't have these discussions, all with the purpose of inspiring others to take action in their own lives, we're doing ourselves almost a disservice type of thing. And I don't mean it like that, because for me, and as you explained, it took you a while to process and absorb and feel what you need to feel. And sometimes I explain it as, maybe walking over burning rocks. Like, we know beforehand, before we even do it, that's going to be hot on our feet. But we do it with the intent and purpose that, okay, something dramatic, something very tragic has happened, and it's a way to process. What would you say? And I do recall, and I just want to back up a tad. I do recall recently that you did um, a post on Facebook, and we are friends on Facebook, and Emily has become my dear friend. And I love saying that because your heart and soul is there with intention and purpose. And you had done a post, and you posted a beautiful picture of yourself. And by the way, I want to obviously welcome our listeners who are also listening through the Wisdom Audio app. Emily is a beautiful person inside and out. And you had posted this beautiful picture of yourself, and you're just so vulnerable and so raw. And you said, oh, it was something to the effect like, okay, here I am, post pandemic, or gain a few pounds, like, big deal. But the big deal was behind that you shared yourself in such a way to inspire others. And I just kind of like sat back, and I'm like, I saw what you were on so many different levels in that picture. Like,
Thank you.
you're welcome. And again, it's showing your raw and vulnerable side in such a way that you can inspire others. And that's really, as we've often chatted about when we've been on together. Obviously your second appearance, but we've chatted before, of course. And the course and direction of your journey has brought us together. And I have to look at that. And I don't believe in coincidences, by the way.
Right.
Don't.
I don't either.
Things happen for a reason. And through our different tragedies in our lives, obviously my most recent being my son's accident, this feels right to me. This feels good to sit down in such a comfortable way where we can talk about these sensitive subjects. As some on may not realize, I am also a survivor of a sexual assault. That is still very difficult for me, even though I've written about it, like, it's out there, and that became an international bestseller. And that's great and all that, but for me to say that and still feel the trauma around that, I
Yeah.
work on it each day. But I feel blessed in the sense that I'm able to express that. And I think that's one of the messages that I would like to share. We have to express how we feel. We don't know what a lot of people are going through. Whew, we don't.
At all. And we have so many things on a global scale, on a national scale, in in an intimate setting. There are so many layers of things that are happening that are forcing people to confront difficult themes, confront political issues, and where people stand and what their boundaries are, and it's challenging each and every one of us all the time, especially now, and has been for the last couple of years, of where we stand on issues, and where we want to put our energy towards. And so fundamentally, everyone is facing something. Everyone is having to look introspectively, or at least that's what this big push has been everyone to look at themselves introspectively and go, what parts do I love about myself? What parts am I afraid of? What parts am I trying to hide? And trying to meld that together to where, we call it the shadow work, where you're looking at parts that aren't so pleasant, actions and behaviors and triggers, and try to make sure that we understand that it's all about balance. And so with that, everyone's everyone's triggered in some sort of way, if not on multiple realms. And that causes people to not feel safe. And so people start, spinning kind of out of control, or it's a fight or flight situation. And so a lot of, particularly in the last few months, what I've been telling all of my clients is just have grace with ourselves and have grace with each other, because these are hard things to negotiate, and not everyone has the tools to navigate that in a healthy way. And that's part of our platform is how do we do that in a healthy way, to support ourselves and then in turn support others.
Right, because sometimes the healthy way is, for instance, I was having this conversation the other day with a friend of mine, and you have to protect your energy. So if you are, let's say, on social media scrolling through and you see something that triggers you, whatever that may be, maybe it's a particular post, maybe it's whatever it may be, it's okay to protect your energy and disengage yourself from that. And I find that therapeutic, because I acknowledge it, and hey, you can, if it bothers you that much, you can, snooze the person, for instance, on Facebook for 30 days. That's okay. That does not need an explanation. You have to do what's right for you, and you don't owe anybody an explanation. And no is a complete sentence and does not require any explanation.
100%. Boundaries are probably, I would say, well, every client that I work with, it comes down to boundaries, right? It just, whether we're empathetic naturally or not, regardless of where, our intuition and our emotions lie, it always comes down to boundaries. And a lot of that goes back to, what is our core values? What are our non-negotiables? And, quickly somebody could think, well, I don't like this or that, or this is kind of where I stand on these spectrums. But when you really sit down and go, what are the things in my life that are non-negotiable? Sometimes that takes a lot more introspection. And it's an exercise I did a few years ago, as I was kind of trying to rebuild myself, through this huge identity crisis of, well, who am I now? Once, you start unlearning the indoctrination, and you start learning and recognizing that for me, a lot of my personality traits weren't personality traits at all. They were trauma responses, which, so as you start going through all that and unlearning, you start going, well, then who am I? And it starts going, for me, it was very basic of, okay, so what colors do I like? What foods do I like? Very basic, what would we consider probably mundane discussions, just to start going, well, at least this is tangible enough to go, this is a part of my identity now, because it is overwhelming. And a huge part of that is going, okay, no matter whom it is, what is something I'm not going to bend on, because that's a self-betrayal, and I'm not going to self-betray anymore. And then that leads obviously to boundaries and whatnot. And so, but by and large, boundaries get such a bad rap. Boundaries, people don't tend to like confrontation. And I'm a full believer that not all confrontation ends terribly. I believe confrontation could be good, because there's a lot of fruitful conversations that can come of it. And it doesn't mean that it's mean. It doesn't mean that it's offensive. It just means that there's different sides of a perspective. And so when we start kind of learning and going, well, we have to have boundaries to protect ourselves, it's no different than, going to the gym or looking at nutrition. Boundaries are a huge part of protecting our peace. And without boundaries, our peace will never be fully protected. Start getting into other aspects, passive aggressive behavior and other kind of coping mechanisms that aren't so positive. But to get to that point, to establish boundaries, and to look at our core values, it does take a little bit of time and a little bit of direct conversations with ourselves of going, gosh, like for me, I was shocked. I was like, oh my gosh, I've made it into my 30s without having any established boundaries. and having any established, lines in the sand regarding non-negotiable behaviors, even though I can say, well, I don't like this or that. And it just changes perspective for sure.
And the perspective, I believe, really is kind of the key to that. For instance, having these discussions that are sensitive in nature would be maybe difficult for people to hear, but looking at it in a perspective of doing a service with someone, like being of service, confirming with them that it's okay to realize that if you are being triggered by the conversation at hand, sometimes I like to sit back and ask myself, okay, why am I being triggered? Like, I ask myself very basic questions. Why am I being triggered? What would my response be? Why do I want to respond a certain way? And if I do respond, what will that do for me? Is it worth me responding? And it's okay to ask yourself those questions. And it's okay for you to put those boundaries in place to protect your perspective. I always say, Emily, some of the best conversations I've ever had, obviously with all my guests on stories, but having those genuine conversations with maybe someone who doesn't agree with my perspective. I enjoy those conversations because for me, I'm learning about how they feel about a certain topic, and hopefully they learn from me. And to me, that is what it's all about. But you still have to keep that boundary intact. What would you say would be maybe a tip that someone could use when having that very sensitive conversation? Because obviously the topic of conversation today is about sexual trauma, going through something very raw, very emotional.
For me, I chose, well, when I was younger, things had come out intermittently, and then they would kind of be addressed within my family with my parents. And then they weren't giving me the emotional support that I needed. And so I kind of closed off again. And so when I started going through my healing process of going, how do I release this energy that's in my body from these traumas? How do I move forward? How do I maintain relationships? With relationships I chose to maintain, not all of them survived or have survived what I'm going through, and that's okay. A huge part of it for me was I was never going to discuss anything with my family until I was in a place for me to be emotionally intelligent enough about it without going in there and just coming from such a dark emotional place, because I knew immediately that's going to trigger the other people in the room. And not so much that I care more about the other people's perspectives, but it was more for me to go, if I want to have something fruitful come out of this, I have to line that up correctly. And it has to come from me because I'm guiding these situations. And so for me, it was two things. One, have I worked through it enough, or am I at peace enough to, and not that I didn't whitewash anything. I didn't go in there with toxic positivity. I was very real about it, but was I able to go in there and speak my piece in a way that was going to satisfy me? And two, what was the intent of those conversations? Was it for resolution? Was it just a declaration of, hey, I'm healing from these. You were participating in that, you were part of those traumas in some way, shape, or form. Things are going to be weird between us for a while until I can fully navigate that. So it was really finding the intent, because a lot of times when we're having crucial conversations with people, if our intent isn't resolute, and if we don't really understand why we're going into it to have those conversations, because of the vulnerability, it's very easily something that escalates very quickly, and then everyone's out of control. And then we're having a fight, or there's, raised voices, and it's certainly not where you wanted to go with it. And so, and also, making sure that I was at peace, that no matter what was coming out of that conversation, it was for me, because I can't control anyone else's responses. I can't make anyone see my side. I can't make anyone provide apologies if they don't feel that way. So if I'm going in there with the intent of kind of pleading my case for someone to say, listen, I'm really sorry, that sucks, then that was the wrong reason for me to go into those. But if I was going in there saying, hey, this does suck, and now our relationship is changed, or like I said, a declarative statement of this is who I am now, both of those resonated within me, that I can control those messages coming across. And it wasn't done with hatred. It was always coming from a place of love. And it doesn't necessarily mean that I loved those people in those moments, or that I loved what happened, because obviously the whole thing is terrible, but it was coming from a place of where I could go, I can speak my truth without problems on my side. And if you choose to accept my truth or not, that's certainly not my prerogative.
Right. It's almost, and thank you so much for sharing that, because speaking our truth is part of the process, but how you go into it. And I know exactly what you are talking about. And I think you have to, it's a process. It's a process. And you have to give yourself that opportunity to clarify how you are going to speak your truth, because that will help you to be calm. That will help you to go in there with the intent of moving forward with your life. And as unpleasant as those conversations were, they were really necessary for the foundation for you to move forward in your life.
Absolutely. There was, and I think, as we're kind of talking about having those declarative moments, which is what I'm calling them, going in there and having honest conversations with people. Like I said, not all of my relationships survived those conversations. And that's okay. In fact, when you start coming from a place of just such darkness and complacency, which is what I was coming from, and surviving, the people in my life tended to reflect that. And so as I'm having these conversations of like, hey, these are my boundaries, these are my conversations, particularly in light of the sexual abuse that occurred for so long, not everything survived that, and it wasn't intended to, and I didn't want it to. And so I guess, and sometimes, yes, some of those relationships were hurtful when they didn't survive, but it was mostly just because it was comfortable for so long, and now we're uncomfortable. And when you start vibrating at a higher frequency, when we start going, no, we are worth it, and we are here, and we're declarative, and I'm not going to apologize because you're uncomfortable because of my story, then people tend to weed themselves out, and that opens up the door for supportive and loving and healthy people to come into your life. And that's also been wonderful. I mean, that's such abundance to have that support around you. So then you can heal. For me, then I can heal even further, because now I'm even more safe. I have people that love and respect me. And although they don't necessarily understand everything I'm going through or can possibly empathize with it, they understand that, this is who I am. And however I need to communicate that I need them to support me in, that's how they'll do it. So whether it's leaving me alone or showing up, we have that understanding now. And that's something I didn't have before. It was just very reactionary. And now it's just much more healthy and proactive. And so that's been an incredible part that's come out of those conversations too.
And that's such a good thing, because I know a lot of times when we do have those conversations, I'm reflecting on my own experience for the moment. When, and it's okay, by the way, that, there are people who are not going to understand. There are people where obviously the relationships are changed. I can certainly vouch for that. And what I will say on that is, as tough as a severed relationship may be, and no doubt it was hard, no doubt there's still hurt. What I have in my heart for this person will always be there in such a way, but there's always a but. And for me, it's, if I was ever to have a relationship with this specific person again, they would need to, for me to do that, they would need to come to the table and apologize for their
Right.
involvement. Now, will that happen? Probably not. But I wish this person good health, good happiness, because that's all I can do right now. And it's okay, because I've set the tone.
Yeah.
I know I've done everything within my power. And to have that is my declarative moment. And it feels good, even though it hurts. It feels good.
Absolutely. And it does feel good, because at some point you start getting your power and your energy back, because you're no longer chasing that, right? I'm not chasing for approval. I'm not chasing for people who don't have the space or want to have the space to talk about these difficult topics, that want to own their part in what's occurred, to treat it as a learning opportunity. A lot of what I've gone through has really centered around generational trauma. And so a lot of my focus has been working within my family of going, are these generational patterns? I know that there's some cultural patterns in there of we don't discuss things. We just pretend they never happen. And so then, so as we're facing those, yeah, I'm offending people by just existing at that point, because I'm willing to have those hard conversations. I'm willing to be vulnerable openly, because that feels right within my soul. But that goes counter to intuitive to what previous generations have been taught. And for them to be good, we don't talk about it. Everything's fine. We're going to just dive right into toxic positivity. Everything's great all the time, even when it's not. And I think that's a fine line too, between going, yes, I'll get through this and there's a silver lining, but right now I'm going to feel this, and going, well, that never happened. We're going to be solid all the time. And then that also forces other people, like within my family, to look at their own histories of abuse. Where was this was this a learned behavior? Where was it learned from? And so really, when you do heal and you are healing and you're going through that and you're having those conversations, you're really the ripple in the water. Because then you're like, okay, let's see how this disperses, and then I'll figure out where I sit within it. But I know that I'm in control of creating that ripple effect, because this is my story, this is my perspective. And you're right, not everybody's ever going to agree. A lot of what I've lost, I say we, because my husband and I have lost friends in the last 2 years from having some of these crucial conversations, from my sexual assault when I was 18. I'm from a small town. Up until up until the last few years, I was sharing the same town as my rapist, 7 blocks away. And so we come from this friend group, and so everybody knew everybody, and everybody knew when it happened, and picking lines and sides. And I just remember really just trying to survive it and try to keep my friend group intact. because that's all I had, which now in retrospect, I was like, oh, good Lord, you should have kicked them all to the curb then. But, so now into our 30s, those themes are still coming up from when I was 18. I'm 36, this was 35. And so, I realized when those relationships exited, one, I didn't miss them. And I got so much energy back because, at some point subconsciously, it was just kind of this, we're surviving when we see them. Everything's locked up and stored. These things never happened. We're just moving along. And then when I was like, so this is pretty messed up and I'm not going to handle this anymore. And this is not okay. And, and it was very disastrous for several months of like everybody kind of internally fighting, because it was like, this is not okay, whether it happened 5 years ago, 2 years ago, 1 year ago, or 18 years ago, not okay on any level. And this is my boundary now at 35. And it was painful for my husband and I, more so my husband than me, because he had relationships with them on a different level that wasn't as traumatic. But I didn't miss them when they exited. I was like, oh my gosh, wow, that's crazy that I put up with so much for so long. And then it starts going into, why did I do that? Where did I not, again, clearly I haven't fully embraced my worth to go, I'm still having to compromise on really important things to keep the peace or to keep people together. And now I'm at a point where I'm like, I don't chase, I attract. So we're not going to chase those down anymore, right? We're just whoever wants to come into my life and show mutual support and reciprocity, I'm 100% for it. And if not, then I will wish you well and send you on your way, and vice versa. I'm not for everybody, and that's okay. I'm not here for everybody. So
Exactly. And I love what you said. I don't chase, I attract. And I might have to steal a little bit of that because I love that. And it's so true when you went, and especially those dynamics of those relationships. I remember saying to someone, maybe a year or two ago, whenever it was, like, I don't care if people have a relationship with this person because it's none of my business.
right.
None of my business. But if that person thinks that what that person did is okay, then guess what? I don't want anything to do with you. And I've been very open and honest because that is me protecting my boundary. What other people do in their lives, none of my business. But I would hope that people would have that same respect all around. And that's not always possible. And again, I am okay with that because, as you mentioned earlier, Indigo Thrive was founded out of the ashes of your story.
Right.
That is big. And, wow, now you've started this business. And by the way, how is Indigo Thrive doing?
It is going so well. I am so humbled by everybody that's willing to either pick up as a new client or who's purchasing the products as a customer. It's been wonderful. It's been fun shipping all over the US. It's been fun creating these products and explaining our platform. It just feels good because this is part of my divine path. And so it just feels very in sync and shows that I am on the right path, because sometimes you just never know when you start healing and going through things. If you're like, I don't know where I am, but it's disorienting, but I'm going to keep going forward. And so these types of things of going, okay, I finally made it to this platform of I'm doing what I need to be doing to fulfill my acts of service and my creativity and do it in a way that is authentic to me because I've gone through these things. So it's been very humbling and very wonderful.
Oh my God, and your face like just lit up. I love that. And she's smiling from ear to ear. So for our listeners on Wisdom, and I want to thank all of you for being here today. Tell us a little bit more about Indigo Thrive? What exactly is it?
Sure. So, um, we've talked on this, and of course, in the first podcast, a lot of, my sexual trauma started around, I want to say around 3, and then it went for a long time, and then it stopped, and then, things happened in my teenage years. So my first 18 years of life have been really just a large traumatic um, episode, a lot of trauma responses, and that's fully, and that's why you're being developed. And so I picked up a lot of negative coping mechanisms and a lot of very difficult things along the way. And then as I entered adulthood, that started to manifest itself physically, meaning I was getting sick all the time. I did develop an autoimmune, which is also genetically passed down. I have celiac disease, so I can't have anything gluten-based at all, without getting extremely sick. Going into my 30s, I was malnourished. I was anemic for a very long time. Actually, I think I'm a little over, I think I'm 13 months or something, 14 months since my last infusion. So we're getting the health on track with nutrition and whatnot. But that trauma compounded into not all of it, but a lot of why I wasn't feeling well. Because at some point, what I've learned is you don't address things long enough, it's going to start showing at some point.
Mhm.
And that happened with me. And of course, there's some genetics and some other things in there too. But Indigo Thrive was created to help me survive my day to day while I was still needing to work full time in a corporate setting in an administrative position. A very high stressful position, running projects and culture change and doing those different types of things. And really coming out of my own healing journey, because when I started this and I was navigating this, I didn't have a support system. I didn't have anyone to go, this is normal. You're going to feel like this. This is complicated. This is, yes, all of it, I had to rely heavily on online resources, and I did get therapy for a few years with that as well. So the products came from, me going, well, we can't just take NSAIDs or ibuprofen, we can't take this all the time because now I have an ulcer, and now we can't do this. And how do we not trigger an autoimmune response? And so that's really where the products came from, which are bath bomb roll-ons and energy sprays. And then the intuitive readings came from just my ability to, as I was healing, realizing that I did have divine talents, and that I needed to be using those to help other people as I help myself. And so it has fully been birthed out of my own experience, and what's worked for us. And I'm so happy to say that it's worked with other people who have autoimmunes and people who don't, because everyone deserves to have clean products and to allow our bodies to heal naturally. And our environments don't always allow that.
Wow. So, Emily, how can our viewers and listeners get in contact with you?
Sure. So we do have an Indigo Thrive Facebook page. So if you look up Indigo Thrive, it'll take you right to our Facebook page. Same with Instagram, indigo.thrive. I'm on TikTok, and our website is indigothrive.com. And so you guys can pick up products through there. If you're in our area, which is in northern Wyoming, we have collaborated with a medical spa called Five Springs Health, and also a sweet little boutique called the Humble Bee. And so you can pick up our products at both of those locations as well.
Wow, that is wonderful. And is it okay with you if anybody on Wisdom right now may want to chat with you? Would you like to do that?
Sure.
Hey, everyone on Wisdom. How are you doing today again? And thank you all so much for being here. I want to welcome anyone, and we only have time for one guest to pop up if you have any questions, or maybe just want to chat with Emily. Come on up. We'd love to have you come on up. Now, Emily, I want to go back again to what you said about momentarily about I don't chase, I attract. Is that something that you say to yourself on a daily basis?
Every day. Part of, and for so many people who have survived trauma, we learn, or we feel somewhere along the way that our worthiness isn't there and we are at the disposal of others. And so every day when I'm like, oh, somebody's mad at me, or I feel someone's mad at me, I'll go, I don't chase, I attract. If someone has an issue, I trust them enough to come to me and have those conversations. If not, then it's my anxiety or it's something else going, no, we're going to create scenarios in our head to protect us. I don't need protection right now. Thank you. You can go along your way. And it also gives people the autonomy to behave the way that they're going to behave without me trying to control those interactions like a chess game. So, which is what I did before with my anxiety being so high.
I hear you on that. Well, oh my gosh, of course, I will make sure that all of your contact information gets in the show notes. This has been such another amazing podcast. I can't thank you enough for being here today.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure to talk with you. Happy to do it anytime.
Wonderful. And again, I want to thank all of my listeners on the Wisdom Audio app. We love sharing these stories, of course, that inspires others. Emily's story is to the heart. And just remember, it's out of the ashes. And the beauty and authenticity of where you can be and things that can happen for you. If you have a story to share, I would love to hear from you. Don't hesitate to reach out. My name is Janice, the host of Stories That Inspire Us. Today, totally inspired by the amazing Emily Hart. Thank you so much, everyone on Wisdom, and we'll see you soon. Hey, Facebook. I want to thank everyone for being here today. These are really the stories that inspire us. There are boundaries to set, and it's okay to do that. My name is Janice, the host of Stories That Inspire Us. Again, Emily, thank you so much for being here. We will see you again real soon. Have a great weekend, everyone. Bye for now.